Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh is on a 4-day official visit to the United States. He's planning to hold bilateral meetings with his US counterpart, Secretary of Defence Lloyd Austin. Now there's a long list of military deliverables from the United States, from GE F-404 jet engines, which power the indigenous light combat aircraft, MQ-9B Predator drones, co-production of the Striker infantry vehicles, and the Javelin anti-tank guided missiles. Now the US is one of India's biggest defense equipment suppliers. It supplied military equipment worth over $20 billion in the last 2 decades. India conducts the most number of military exercises with the US military, more than it does with any other country. And both countries have signed multiple agreements. They're partners in the Quad with Australia and Japan. But is the United States a reliable defense partner? Can Defence Minister Rajnath Singh's visit up the momentum in the India-US defense engagements? Joining me to discuss this are Dr. Swasti Rao, Associate Fellow from the MP-IDSA, Major General Ashwani Siwach, and in the studio with me is my colleague Deepak Bhadana. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. General Siwach, I want to start by asking you this. The India-US defense relationship hasn't looked better ever. It's like we are literally short of an ally of the United States. We've got most of what we wanted from the US. But, you know, there is that niggling doubt at the back of our mind, especially of our policymakers in the defense ministry. It was not so long ago that you had that Damocles sword of sanctions, which continues to hang on the Indo-US defense relationship even now, 20 years later. How much of an issue will the possibility of US sanctions on Indian defense deals, how much of an issue is it still in 2024?
Very correct. There's Sandeep, no doubt. See, as far as India and US relationship are concerned, in last 2 decades, irrespective of any party ruling India or in US, whether it is Democratic or Republican government, it has gone upswing. We have signed 4 basic agreements, that is COMCASA, Communication Compatibility and Security Agreement. Then we signed LIMIO, Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement. And the last we signed was Basic Exchange Cooperation Agreement. It means as on today, the Americans are ready to give you state-of-art weapon system of critical technology. In the sense they earlier did not have that much faith in us, possibly thinking that if they pass some critical technology, it can be passed to Russian. But of late, it is seen that both these countries are become a strategic partner, and we are moving in that field. Now,
Absolutely,
what have we done correctly in these 20 years? You see, the point is that everyone looks after his national interest. As far as India is concerned, when we could not get a latest weapon system from US, we relied more on Russia. And we were taking almost 70% of our defense equipment from them. But we realized that the technology of Western power and the US is far, far superior than Russians. And the Russia itself has got a lot of economic problems. So we will like to take weapon system from US, provided it is ready to give 2 things. One is the latest technology, and second thing is that basically joint production or make in India. Now, considering the economy of India, the way India has now a 5th largest economy, a huge market, you find a lot of change which has taken place in US thought process, and they realized it that in case they have to rely upon any country in Indo-Pacific to counter China, it is India. And therefore, they have given us the weapon system which were no one else has got it in the South Asia, which I can only say C-17 Glowmaster, C-13J Hercules, then Apache attack helicopter, Chinook helicopter which has been given. So M777 ultralight Howitzer, and most of these weapons which have been given also being manufactured in India itself. Now M777 ultra Howitzer, which is state of art, is being now manufactured by Mahindra Defense. So the question coming is, one, that they are ready to give you latest technology, critical technology, and second thing is They are ready to transfer this technology and make in India. Now, this has made a tremendous change, Sandeep.
Right, absolutely. And I'm going to ask Dr. Rao this question. Dr. Rao, you just heard a lot of defense hardware, General Siwach talking about M777s and C-17s, C-130s, and you have a whole laundry list of items that India has been operating of US origin. But the main thing is that none of these are actually made in India. They're not even assembled in India. They're all off-the-shelf purchases. And there doesn't seem to be anything in the pipeline either to suggest that there will be something like the impact of the BrahMos, for instance, that India makes with Russia. And one automatically goes to the Russian example because that's the only other big power that we've dealt with for several decades. What is it that the India-US defense partnership, what is that hurdle that they have to overcome before we can get to, say, the level of comfort that we enjoy with the Russian Federation?
Well, so I think there are ways to look at, at this question. It's a layered question. Of course, we all understand that. See, the first thing is that we all have to understand that time had been on the side of Indo-Russia relations when it came to defense. For sure, Russians enjoyed a kind of I would say, a monopoly, over the geopolitical circumstances that kind of shifted us, sort of pushed us with the Soviet Union in 1971 and thereafter. So you have to sort of give the right due attention to the fact that there was enough time. You also know that the DPSUs got into these. There was a lot of space to actually create that monopoly, which the Russians did actually.
Yes.
But now, I think with the geopolitical changes, with how the geopolitical situations have changed in the 2000s particularly, and with all the details that General Siwach also gave, I think the one thing that we need to remember is that when it comes to technology, when it comes to technological innovation or advancements, of course, the Russian weapons are no match for it. That's first. And one has to say it in a very objective manner. This is nothing to do with India's standalone relations with Russia or the kind of trust that we've built over the years. This has also got to do with basically technological, performances. So that's one, of course, that's one part. The other part, if you look carefully, Sandeep, is that India's new age defense cooperations or defense industry cooperations are also entwined deeply with a very strategically driven cooperation in national technology strategies. Okay.
Right.
So if you look at the US, on the one hand, you see in a very short time how the US has kind of emerged as this major player for India's defense. Not just procurement, but also exports, because there was a report yesterday that surfaced where Snehesh was discussing how more than 51% of India's defense exports are actually going to the US. So it's not just one way, it's both ways. And we would like to discuss it later. But coming back, so the emergence of the US is also supported by the ISET, which is steered at the NSA level. And I can give you a parallel with France, which is India's second biggest weapons, exporter, where a very robust defense industrial roadmap is again entwined with a 2019 signed cooperation on national technologies, critical and emerging technologies. And this was ratified in 2023. So the point that I'm trying to sort of focus on is that, yes, so far we do not have anything like the BrahMos, but remember the kind of time that went into actually putting together one BrahMos. So you have to sort of keep that in mind. Besides the competitiveness of the general defense ecosystem today, the involvement of the private sectors.
Yes.
Okay, and fourthly, this other parallel vertical, which is steered by the NSA level, in the case of the US for sure, which is this, cooperation on national technology and the critical and emerging technology. So these are the things that kind of give it that entire contour, okay, of how one should be looking at what is happening in India-US strategic dimension, especially when it comes to defense. Now, whether this is going to get better with time, yes, of course, I think this is going to get better with time, because the geopolitical and the geostrategic logic is that it is today in the US's interest to have an empowered and a strong India in the Indo-Pacific, because there is no way under the sun that the US can actually support Ukraine, support Israel, look after what is happening in Taiwan, and then
Yes.
also look at the Indo-Pacific at large. So it is in US's interest. And especially when these kind of convergences are driven by a national interest, then they are there for long.
Absolutely, and very, very important points, Dr. Rao. I'm going to come back to that issue of sanction-proofing our defense supplies from the United States. But first, I want to ask Deepak, my colleague here in the studio. Deepak, you've been tracking both the Russian-India military relationship and, of course, the US-India military relationship. And in a manner of speaking, both countries are at war. Russia literally is fighting a battle with Ukraine. And it's a proxy war with NATO. And the United States has its own issues with China and Taiwan in the South China Sea. So, and it's also supplying a lot of hardware to
Israel.
Ukraine and Israel. Yes.
Yeah.
And there are active conflict zones all across the world. And of course, you cannot emphasize the importance of Make in India enough. But given the fact that all these countries are at war, defense industry is back, the military industrial complex is back. What are the key challenges going to be really for us when we look at both the United States and Russia? Supplier number one and supplier number two.
The other day I read a very interesting comment on the internet wherein the poster stated that India has become the Switzerland of South Asia. We're friends with everyone, we supply everyone,
Right.
We mediate with everyone.
Yes.
And it's no doubt a byproduct of, the fine balance when it comes to foreign policy
Right.
that India has managed
Absolutely,
to...
but Deepak, I must quickly interrupt you here. Switzerland does not have Pakistan and China as its neighbors, friendly neighbors.
No, it's not in South Asia. You see.
Yeah, and it's not in South Asia.
But there are some things to look at from
Yes.
Mr. Rajnath Singh's visit over there. Two key agreements that have been signed.
Yes.
The first one being the security of supply arrangements.
Right.
Now, this is simply a commitment between India and the US that they will come to each other's aid when it
Right.
comes to supply of defense materials.
Yes.
And to an extent, that has already been happening.
Yes.
How has US become the number one importer of? That is because India is supplying a load of 155 shells.
Yes.
Right. Then there is the second one, which is called the DPAS. This is the Defense Priority and Supply System.
Yes.
Right. This is more of a mechanism wherein, say, the industries from both countries, they coordinate with each other and they anticipate upcoming demands.
Right.
But there is a critical point when it comes to SOSA, the first agreement, that is that it's non-binding.
Yes.
So the sanction proofing is yet to be done.
Sanction proving yet to be done, and that's a question that I'm going to ask Dr. Rao this. But before that, General Siwach, how do you sanction proof the India-US defense relationship? How much ever we talk about this, whatever agreements we sign, there's nothing that can save you from the US Congress, literally. There is no act there is nothing that is supreme over the US Congress. What can India really do in a situation like this to ensure that we have a steady supply of spares for our existing warships, our aircraft, spy planes and the like?
Sandeep, there are 2-3 ways of looking at it. Now, first of all, you have to see the track record of US. It is not only dealing with India, it is dealing with number of Middle East countries, also
Yes.
providing a lot of military hardware to the NATO countries. National interest of each country is taken care of. Now, considering that our interests are matching now and will likely to match in future, considering what is happening in Indo-Pacific and Indian Ocean and the way China is trying to come up and trying to put pressure on Indo-Pacific against Southeastern nations, also against Taiwan.
Yes.
I feel we should not be hyper sensitive on that. Now,
Right.
let's see it. We are taking which all weapons on the pipeline, and have they been delivered or there is a delay? Now, as far as this engine G404 is concerned,
Yes.
which we want to put it on basically Tejas Mark-1 and 1 Alpha. That has been delayed, no doubt about it. The General Electrical is the one which is manufacturing that. This
Yes.
will be jointly produced by India and HAL in time to come, not now. Of the shelf we are getting, and they are trying to give us almost 7 to 8% indigenous. We want almost about 20%. The question comes is that there may be delay, but delay are due to many other reasons.
Yes.
The sanction, I don't think they are going to be put. Any sanction which is going to be put will impact both sides.
Yes.
After all, why this war, Russia-Ukraine war, is continuing. It is the industrial military complex of US which is thriving. So
Yes.
therefore, the point is we should not be hypersensitive that. Second thing which I tell you, MQ-9 drones. Now,
Right.
MQ-9 drones are going to be 31, which is a mega project, $3.9 billion, which
Yes.
we are taking 15 for the Navy and 8 each for Army Air Force. And that again, Bharat Forge will be doing this understanding that in time to come, General Atomics and Bharat Forge can manufacture together. All these things will not happen over a period of time. It will take a long time.
Right.
But my only point is we are very careful in going along with US, knowing their track record, also see what they dealing with other countries. I suppose there is no choice neither between India nor with US. We have to coordinate and cooperate, and we must understand that you are not going to get the same deal now from Russia.
Yes.
Russia economy is not going to remain same as it was earlier. Russia dependence on China will increase.
Absolutely.
Russia technology is not what it used to be. So you have no choice but to depend upon the Western country, whether it is France or whether
Yes.
US.
Yes,
Now, in the
General
other
Siwach.
two pipelines,
Yes.
Sandeep, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Another which is on the pipeline is basically you see this infantry combat vehicle,
Yeah.
the Striker, which again some agreement will come when Rajnath Singh will meet Austin Lloyd. And also basically what we are trying to take is another weapon system, which is a anti-tank gun missile. That
Yeah.
is Javelin missile, which
Yes.
is again a very potent weapon. So I suppose we must take it positively and
Right.
have an understanding, have some close, but US is not going to ditch you what it has ditched earlier.
Yes.
Because US needs us, we need US.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask that to Dr. Rao. You know, this point that you raised earlier, Dr. Rao, the fact that the US is one of India's largest export destinations for military equipment. That was brought out in the print and earlier by the Defence Ministry as well. The fact that nearly 50% of Indian defence exports go to the United States. You know, could this military-industrial complex to military-industrial complex, these interdependencies, could they ensure some kind of sanction proofing of military hardware on both sides? Given the fact that you get enough time, you know, give it some time, say 10, 15 years. It's not going to happen in months. It'll take years.
Yeah, so I mean, just considering the fact that we actually started, like for all practical purposes, we started around 2016, right?
Yes.
You know, India-US defense relations, and in that regard, you see that less than 10 years we are where we are. So this is nothing short of miraculous. That's one. Of course, there's geopolitics which is pushing it, and then you mentioned the interlinkages. Well, of course, one of the ways in which you also build reliability is by building these interlinkages. So there is the interlinkages logic out there, which kind of builds reliability, and reliability builds it back. So you have that. Just the other thing about the US and sanction proofing, I think there's also this little need to redefine what we mean by sanction proofing. India, so far, I'm not even able to recall when was the last time when India was actually sanctioned by the US for a defense deal. I think was it in the 1960s somewhere, if I'm not wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So what I'm saying is that do we have a precedent? Do we have a precedent where SOSAs, and the US has it with a lot of partners in the world? General Siwach was also mentioning there's a list actually. When you go to the DoD website, you can actually see that long list of all the Western partners with whom it has. I think when it comes to sanctions, there has been so much narrative building around the S-400 purchases, for example. And US actually sanctioned Turkey, which is a NATO member, but never sanctioned India. And even in 2022, if you remember, there was this massive narrative again of, whether the US is going to sanction. So what I'm trying to say is that perhaps the sanction proofing understanding needs to sort of, reworked a little bit, keep in mind the geopolitical realities of our times, because by themselves, in an absolute sense, they don't really mean anything. Okay. And ultimately, if you look at it from the US's perspective, I will perhaps understand why they would want to keep this stick on, because come on, I mean, look at it, look at something from India's perspective. When we talk to the Europeans, for example, or other Western powers to come and invest in India, one of the things that they always complain about is that we don't get investment guarantees. But at the same time, we tell them to come and invest and have
Yeah.
trust in the Indian system, isn't it? So I think that walking that extra mile will build that
Yes.
reliability. And we have started young, we have a long way to go. So I think we should not be prejudgmental, and we should not
Right.
suffer from preconceived notions. But at the same time, my suggestion would be to always have the cautious cap on, which is that yes, let's be cautious. Let's not just sort of be blinded with this. But yes, I think this is in India's national interest, and that's what matters.
It's in India's national interest indeed. And Dr. Rao, I was actually referring to the post-Pokhran era when you had not US hardware, but foreign equipment from the UK,
yeah, that's a
which had
different- yeah,
which
yeah,
had US
that's-
components, and we couldn't access those because of the sanctions. So the indirect sanctions in a sense, because we didn't have any US origin equipment then. But now, of course, the game has changed considerably, and one can only hope, Deepak, that our mutual loathing of China, both the United States and India, drives us into a partnership where both countries can opt out of, and they have no option but to stay for the long course. As Dr. Rao mentioned, that we need to put our cap of caution on while we approach this defense relationship with the United States, it is phenomenal what we have seen since 2016. In less than a decade, the India-US defense relationship has been transformed. The kind of technologies that we talk, the agreements that we've been talking. Of course, that Damocles sword of sanctions always remains, but that's a discussion for another day. Thank you very much, General Siwach, Dr. Rao, and my colleague Deepak Bhadana for joining us as we track the India-US defense relationship while Defence Minister Rajnath Singh is in the United States. Delayed registration of an FIR, a crime scene trampled all over. Attempts to pass off a horrific rape and murder as suicide. Now, the Kolkata rape and murder case has outraged India, but it has once again spotlighted severe deficiencies in the conduct of the police. Now, the Supreme Court, while hearing this case, said this of the Kolkata police, and I quote Justice Pardiwala, "The entire procedure followed by your state police," he said, "is something I have not encountered in 30 years. He was speaking about the way the Kolkata police has conducted a shoddy investigation into this heinous case. Now, 18 years ago, in 2006, the Supreme Court delivered a historic verdict in the Prakash Singh versus Union of India case. Prakash Singh was a former DGP who petitioned the Apex Court for implementing police reforms. The Supreme Court made 7 landmark directives in that case. And today we are looking at how many of those reforms have been implemented and what indeed keeps them from being implemented. Because the police in India are being seen as corrupt and overburdened. They are under the executive. They have unchecked power. The political executive has impacted their functioning, their credibility, and there's the emergence of new crimes like cyber crimes, and there's calls for technological upgradation of the police system with forensics and more modern technology. Police reforms have been debated in India for over 3 decades, but why have they not been implemented so far? And joining me to discuss this today are Dr. Vikram Singh, former DGP Uttar Pradesh Police, and my colleague in the studio, Mr. Ashok Bagadia. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Dr. Singh, I want to start by asking you this. Case after case, we come back to that original argument, that case filed by our predecessor in the UP police, Mr. Prakash Singh, police reforms. 3 decades after Mr. Prakash Singh filed that case, we're still debating on police reforms, why they've not been implemented. But, coming to this particular case, we'll start with the Kolkata rape and murder case. What is it about the police, the conduct of the police, that shocked you? We just read out what the Supreme Court, one of the justices of the Supreme Court, had to say about the police. What are your observations about the way the Kolkata police conducted this investigation?
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm so happy that you have raised this question. This is of paramount importance. The Calcutta police stands totally compromised today and has disgraced the uniform. And when I say disgraced the uniform, not a single statute of the rule book was implemented in letter or spirit or both in the course of the investigation. To the contrary, everything was done to compromise the truth and the investigation so that the truth never emerges. The reasons may be manifold, and the primary reason being they are under total control and the vice-like grip of their political master. It is akin to following the line prescribed by the political bosses, and the police are doing exactly what his master's voice would dictate. Prakash Singh versus Union of India started in 1996, judgment 2006, and lo and behold, even after 18 years, 2 decades, not much has happened to have a faithful implementation of those 7 points. What to talk of implementation? Judge after judge serving chief justices of the Supreme Court said, what can I do if the chief ministers are not cooperating? Observation number 1. Observation number 2. Reforms come and reforms go. Well, there's nothing much that you can do. The fact of the matter is that if a full bench bench of the Supreme Court gives a judgment, that is the law of the land, and not to follow it, I feel, is a gross contempt of court. And the letter and spirit, and unofficially, when I have spoken to my politician friends,
Yes,
of the national level importance, they have said, the day we implement police reforms, we will become redundant and useless. Our politics starts from the police chowkis and ends at the police station. If we give up our control, vice-like grip on the police, then there would be no politics for us to do. We'll have to venture into other occupations.
absolutely. And very well said, Dr. Singh. The fact that, the vice-like grip that the politicians have on the police is literally what's keeping many of them going. And in fact, this observation that Mr. Prakash Singh once told me is that, the police in a lot of states function like the erstwhile state forces, Ashok, if you remember the state forces that a lot of, princely states in pre-independent India had. That's the way police forces function in a lot of states. And this is something that we've seen, literally witnessed firsthand in West Bengal, the shoddy investigation by the Kolkata police, which has been raised by the Supreme Court as well. But Dr. Vipul Mudgal now joins us. He's Director and Chief Executive of Common Cause. Dr. Mudgal, we've all seen what the Kolkata police did, or rather did not do, in this very sensational case of this horrific rape and murder that we just saw. There is a pattern to this. In every such sensitive case, you have the police literally acting in a manner that suggests collusion with the perpetrators, which is why crime scenes are manipulated, evidence vanishes, witnesses turn hostile, all of this. Given the fact that we have a judgment as landmark as what the Supreme Court gave in 2006, a full bench of the Supreme Court in the Prakash Singh versus Union of India case, isn't there some way that we can get states to implement some of the key recommendations that the Supreme Court gave? The 7 directives that the Supreme Court gave in 2006, 6 for the states and 1 for the center.
Yeah. Who would know it better than us? We were the co-petitioners, Sandeep. Common Cause was a co-petitioner
Yes.
with Mr. Prakash Singh in the police reforms case. So, we have been pursuing this case in our own way, although it is being led by Mr. Prakash Singh completely. And I agree with Mr. Singh, who said, spoke just before me. He said the state governments have no political will.
Yes.
If they want to, they can probably do. See, there have been things, very simple things like a police complaints commission. Now,
Right.
police complaints commission has to function at the district level. So the state after state is making sure that it does not function, or if it functions under the thumb of the, of police leadership of that district. So there are, all the 7 directives you talked about, we know them backwards. The State Security Commission for
Yes.
Transfers and Promotions. You remember this case of Sachin Waze?
Yes.
Who was who murdered
The Maharashtra
somebody?
police officer,
he was
absolutely, yes.
Maharashtra police officer in his attempt to kind of solve a case which he himself had brought up, which was like taking a SUV in front of an industrialist house,
Yes.
and he created a terrorism case. He was suspended police officer for 16 years, and he was reinstated just like this, because
Yes.
one Home Minister of Maharashtra wanted him to be reinstated, because according to the police commissioner later, after he was removed from his post, he said that he was supposed to collect rupees 100 crores every month for the politician. And these are serious people. These are very important
Absolutely.
people talking. The other thing I want to say is that after Nirbhaya case, which shook the conscience of this country, not far back, I mean, this is
Right.
just about 2012, we had a very important committee which was formed under none other than Justice J.S. Verma, one of India's most illustrious judges.
Yes.
I thought there was a very senior jurist, Gopal Subramaniam, who was part of this thing. Justice Leela Seth was part of the committee. Now, I can understand that the police reform case is almost like an omnibus case.
Yes.
Okay, it concerns everything, starting from transfers and promotions to kind of dismissals, disciplinary action, appointments, etc. But what about this? This committee, a recent report, was a focused report on sexual harassment cases, on the security of women in the country. There were very simple recommendations like a rape case cell should be set up. The
Yes.
moment you hear of a case like this, then Paramdeep Singh, it's a famous ruling of the Supreme Court of India that all police stations should be covered by CCTV,
Yes.
functioning CCTV. And in cases like this, the FIRs should be allowed to be filed online and they should be registered immediately. Now, today, even in places where you can file online FIRs, they concern only vehicle theft cases and stuff like that. You can't file a rape petition
Right.
and it's not just West Bengal, it's happening in Maharashtra and many other places. So, the recommendations about family members, recommendations about members of the public, recommendations about training of the police officers, specifically, in areas of sexual offences
Yes.
and things like community policing, etc. So, we have not done much, in fact, to implement. A Nebra fund has been created. A lot of money is flowing from center to states and within states to thanas, and there are some places lit up better than they were earlier. But we have not addressed it adequately.
We haven't addressed it adequately, and Ashok, case after case is the same story. It starts with a sensational crime, and then it finally all boils down to the state of police, whether it is that sensational case in Mumbai of, as our panelists were mentioning, the Antila case where Sachin was a investigating officer was actually the guy who was, committing many of the crimes according to what the police have discovered. And as Dr. Singh mentioned, the fact that the police are in the vice grip of the politicians. Given the fact that you have something as simple as the constitution that mentions law and order as state subject, will this continue forever? Are we fated to see this battle continuing, that states holding on to the police and saying, no, I will not reform them, I will keep them exactly the way they were when the British left India? We've reformed the BNS, but we have not been able to crack police reforms.
Yes, things will not change until and unless there is a political will.
Yes.
Now, the primary problem or the principal problem with the police force in our country is politicization of the police force. They, as it was rightly pointed out by one of the panelists, that the cops have to depend for their transfers, postings and other benefits that come to them in the due course of their service. They have to depend on the politician doling it out to them.
Right.
The second thing is, as far as a incident like a Nirbhaya case or a Kolkata rape and murder case is concerned, that it also points to a very important fact that there is a crying need to train the police force, in the sense that, look, you can't teach old monkeys new tricks. Right. Now let's forget about the cops who've already joined the force or who are a part of the force, but the focus should be on the people who are now going to join the force.
Yes.
There has to be a degree of sensitization.
Right.
There is a very crying need to sensitize the police force, saying that, look, you are no longer part and parcel of the colonial police force that existed before 1947. You have to meet the aspirations and demands of the people. You have to interact with them. You have to communicate to them. You have to respond to their complaints. Now, the Calcutta rape and murder case is a case and study where the cops were not only negligent in performing the duties, but they were not sensitive enough
Yes.
to the incident that had taken place. Now there is a delay, not really a long delay, but there is a huge delay of 12 hours
Yes.
in registering of the first information report. Now this only happens after the body of this 31-year-old doctor is cremated, and even 3 hours after the cremation is an FIR lodged. FIR should have been lodged the moment the police came to know that an incident of this nature had taken place.
Yes.
When they examined the body of the doctor there, it would have revealed itself
Right.
that it was a ghastly offense that had been committed.
Absolutely.
And those cops had to act immediately, but they dragged their feet. They thought there was something more what met their eyes, and possibly there could have been other reasons also that they delayed the registration of the FIR. So according to me, three things. One is depoliticization
Yes.
of the police force, secondly training, and third thing is again decolonization of the police force.
Dr. Singh, I'm going to ask you these 3 points that Ashok raised, that depoliticization of the police force, training, sensitization, and of course, decolonization. Is there a roadmap that you have in mind at all, given the fact that how deeply politicized the police force is? Do you think any of these could be implemented in the next decades or so?
I asked these questions when I joined the service in 1974, and it was said that maybe in the next 5 years, you will have a much, much better situation. And the answer to all your questions would be yes by 1980. Come 2024, I don't see it happening in the foreseeable future because we are more feudal today, more inefficient, and more hostile and anti-people than we were ever today. I would say that our use of force would beat even the Britishers hollow. The sensitization is not there, the training is appropriate training is not there. We get the best stuff as far as brains are concerned, the best men and women in the country join the IPS now.
Yes.
Boys and girls from the IIT and IM. But something transformed them in the next 10 years that ki ma badaulat aur huzur wala, as if the Mughal emperor is entering the court. We get that feudal mindset and it doesn't go away.
Yes.
That has to go. We are the servants of the people. Politicians come and politicians go. But the
Right.
fact of the matter is, when you reach my stage, you are accountable to your conscience and the Almighty. For heaven's sake, my young friends in the IPS, the
Yes.
leadership can create wonders. Let us not be insulated. The government will not insulate us from politics, but we can insulate from the frivolous issues and be accountable to the rule of law. That is my one-liner to my young police friends.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that point that you made about our best and our brightest still that joined the IPS, Dr. Singh, but miraculously transformed into, many of them indeed are transformed into the very feudal icons that we despise. But Dr. Vipul Mudgal, is there any hope at all? Is there something that you see, any light at the end of the tunnel? Is there something like we saw the Indian Penal Code being modified, you have the BNS coming in. Do you see anything like that happening with the police reforms? I mean, and can India, I mean, lastly, but can India become a developed nation by 2047 with the kind of antiquated, police force that we have?
Yeah, no, I think don't be too get too carried away by the new DNS, etc. I mean, they have, instead of some parts of it, and some parts of
Yes.
it are better, there's no doubt, and there has should be, but some parts of it are so ridiculous that I would use the would use the term recolonization rather than decolonization. You know, let me take, for example, this. If there was a case of police atrocity, custodial death, or custodial violence, or police firing, there was a mandatory inquiry by the judicial magistrate. Now the BNS has changed it, the new laws have changed it to an inquiry, mandatory inquiry by a magistrate. So the judicial word is missing. Although even judicial inquiries, as Dr. Singh would know better than me, even those can be tempered with, but the fact that you remove it, that means an SDM who's a magistrate, can also conduct an inquiry. In places where a police commissioner is a magistrate, can conduct an inquiry. This is why? Why are we going back on
Absolutely.
things like this?
Yes.
Let's see the NCRB reports. In fact, India has done some fabulous work. Our NCRB reports are coming out continuously, although some portions of it have not been kind of disclosed to the public, like
Yes.
how many, the diversity of the police, how many police officers come from the minority, etc. But look at these numbers. There has been a slight increase in the cases of crime against women in the last few years.
Yes.
There is, rather than going down, which means we are actually moving in the opposite direction. There has been an increase in child rape cases.
Yes.
And you would know what
Shocking.
happened in Maharashtra recently.
Yes.
There was a case of child rape. Now, Justice Pardiwala said, in fact, in this Kolkata case, that he said this is not very surprising. Post-mortem precedes registration of unnatural death cases. This is nothing really surprising for it. And please remember, the entire society is also responsible apart from the police. The way the doctors deal with some of these cases, they just do the bidding of the authorities or
Right.
what is coming from the state government. Look at the magistrates. There is a
Right.
role of the magistrate in every serious case. There is a role of the doctor, the forensic scientist. All these infrastructures will have to be built. You just
Absolutely.
go
All the
into
pillars of the
recommendations.
justice system are in
Exactly.
are in deep
Yeah.
decay and in need of reform. But Ashok, police reforms again, one of the most critical pillars of the entire justice system, that has been untouched largely, and that's come out so horrifically in the Kolkata case. No short-term solution possible, given the kind of antagonism that the center and the states have. You don't see anything coming out of this.
See, there cannot be any short-term solutions to this problem. It has to be looked at a long-term measure.
Yes.
So firstly, what I believe is that these are small steps that we'll have to start taking, is that focus more on training of the new police
Yes.
personnel, which we are getting. It can be done, whether there's a political will or not a political will,
Absolutely.
that can always be done. The second thing is that whenever you encounter cases of delinquency, negligence, or any other misdeed by a cop, it should be made a punishable offense in the sense, and it should be treated on priority basis. The case should be completed on a priority basis, because I say this because a larger message goes out to the police force that, look, if I or some other person is going to act in a negligent manner, I
Yes.
will not be spared. So that message has to go out.
That message
and that
has to go
message
out.
has to go out that
Absolutely.
no political master will be able to save you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashok, and thanks for joining us, Dr. Mudgal, Dr. Vikram Singh, as we speak about reforms delayed and justice denied. It's once more become evident in this horrific Kolkata rape and murder case. Fintech brand Grow moved back to India from the United States this March. Now, there's a long list of companies that are waiting in the wings. Flipkart, Razorpay, Zepto, Pine Labs, Meesho, and many, many more. They're all in the process of moving their domiciles back to India in the coming months. Most of these companies have IPOs planned for the Indian bourses. So what has changed really? What is flipping really? Joining me to discuss this and his story, in fact, in the studio is my colleague Amit Ranjan. Amit, what's changed? Why are the Indian companies rushing back home?
The much touted ease of doing business
Yeah.
has happened. Over the years, it has changed.
Right.
It is easier to do business in India now. Tax incentives have improved. Angel tax is gone, as we know, so it is better
Right.
for startups. But most of these startups are actually eyeing the IPO route. It is easier to have raise market in the Indian markets for
Raise
Indian
capital
companies.
in the Indian market, so
Than-
they're coming back.
than
for-
abroad. So that is
Yes.
the one thing that they are eyeing, most of these.
Yes.
But of course, there are other factors. The market capitalization, the returns from the Indian bourses also. The
Yes.
stock markets from India has gone
booming,
up almost.
absolutely.
Yeah, and for the last 10 years, there's only one way, that is up.
Right. So that's interesting. So it's not just ease of doing business, EODB, it's also ease of raising capital,
Yes.
EORC, and that's
Yes.
the reason for these companies to come back.
Come back, yes.
So, Amit, as I understand it, it's easier, you know, they're outweighing their gains that they would have made offshore from the Indian market by listing on Indian bourses. That's the main reason they're all coming
Most
back.
of them are startups, therefore comeback kids.
Yes.
When they listed, at that time, it was a better idea to register yourself in the foreign markets, because that time even the term startup
Was
not
alien,
was
absolutely.
not in the
Right.
regular lexicon at that time. So that time it did not make sense. Now it does. Angel tax has gone, tax reforms have happened, but still there is a long way to go, because still there are some companies that have not come, and there are companies that are still moving out.
There's companies that are moving out, but tell us about the big ones that are out there who haven't bitten the bait of ease of doing
There are
business.
quite a few. I mean, PhonePe came back earlier on, but there are quite a few. And then there are foreign companies that had come to India
Right.
that are moving out. One big roadblock is ESOPs.
Right.
Google, Apple were both incubated in universities.
Yes.
Professors invested in them. That's not allowed in IIT or IIM. They're
Right.
not allowed. That ESOP reforms have not come. Two, tax reforms in certain countries, not all.
Yes.
If a company that is registered there makes money outside its shores,
Right.
it is not taxed for those profits. In India, that's not the case still.
It's not the case still.
Still.
So we have a way to go before
They're
all
happening.
the other companies.
The reforms are happening.
Work in
but yeah,
progress.
work in
Right.
progress. Yeah.
You can catch Amit's story dropping on the News9 Plus app, the Comeback Kids, only on the News9 Plus app to watch.
We make it difficult. We don't need a third-party enemy. We are our own worst enemies in making it difficult for startups to operate.
Our taxation rate at 15% for new manufacturing units and 25% for a corporate is one of the lowest in the world.
A number of the consultancy and advisory firms that help these companies flip overseas have now actually started doing Garvapsi tours as well, where they're actually coming up with a scheme to help these companies flip back to India in a very tax efficient manner.